Welcome to Exhibition. And hello, Miranda Skoczek.
Hello, Richard. Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here.
Oh, lovely to see you again. And your exhibition is Floating Moons, Dizzying Hues at Nicholas Thompson Gallery in Melbourne. And first, we have to say congratulations on a completely sold out exhibition. And especially congratulations, I guess, in these times of COVID restriction, because the gallery can't, as many galleries can't, function as normal.
No, it's certainly a pretty crazy time, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a wee bit nervous in the lead up. Obviously, artwork is to be, well, my paintings are very much to be experienced in real life, up close and from afar too. So yes, I'm thrilled that it has been received so positively, and yeah, I'm very grateful as well.
So, of course, there are different levels of restriction in different parts of Australia, but in Melbourne, of course, there are very severe restrictions at the moment with the COVID-19 challenge. Does that effectively mean at the moment that people are just not able to see your works in the flesh at all?
No, they're not. I think when the show first opened, thankfully, before stage 4, Nicholas was still able to have one-on-one appointments. So a few people were able to come in and see the works, but I actually have sold the majority of the work outside of Victoria. So everybody has had to rely on technology, on the internet. And yeah, I guess the one heartening thing is that if somebody is drawn to the work, you know, on a computer screen or what have you, they're guaranteed to enjoy it more, obviously, when they're experiencing it in the real. So, yeah.
That's something for them very much to look forward to, actually seeing the works in reality when they receive them. And just going to that, because these are times, strange times, where, as we're seeing, an entire exhibition can sell out pretty much online. But for your work, how different is the experience of being able to see it close up? What is it in general that people will be able to see in your work in reality that they can't really see online?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, you know, what is so important with my work is that people have a almost sort of visceral experience when standing before them. It's very important that my works have that sort of haptic quality, you know, that sense of touch. And you know, I've been, for as long as I can remember, I've been drawn to textiles and the history of textiles, mostly from ancient civilizations. And so, you know, I'm very interested in sort of creating cloth-like surfaces at times, though, you know, on the one canvas, because obviously I usually like to work very large, there are sort of myriad surfaces to enjoy. You know, you go from very sort of built up, almost sculpture-like surfaces that I've sort of carved into almost, and then, you know, beside that there will be very silky, smooth, almost at times sanded back surfaces. You know, I'm very much a lover of this particular paint, which is, you know, an interference paint. So depending on where you're standing in front of the work, the light changes, and as you move around it and the different times of day, it appears in a different manner. So yeah, they're the things you lose out on over the internet.
Yes. Well, of course, most people will be looking at and listening to this conversation over the internet with the images, of course, um, being there before them in that way. But I'm interested when you were talking about fabrics. Much of the paint that you use is often very thinned out, reduced to veils of colour. Let's go to a particular work. In fact, really one of the title works, in a sense, from the exhibition, Floating Moons, and we can see some of the marks, some of the paint there is thin, light, almost fabric-like. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, definitely. But then in other cases, I'm a huge lover of nomadic textiles, mostly rugs and carpets. So on the other hand, I can have very sort of impasto and built up and scratchy sort of surfaces. But yes, definitely with Floating Moons, they're very much sort of veils of colour, and the colours are created by, layer after layer of these very fine and translucent layers. So yeah, very sort of silken like surfaces. And yeah, I'm very feminine too, I suppose. I'm very drawn to work that is typically made by women. Definitely with that work, it's definitely very much of a lighter and translucent quality.
The exhibition title is Floating Moons, Dizzying Hues. And maybe going to some of the dizzying hues, or an example of dizzying hues, reminiscing in pink. There is such an intensity of colour, and I wonder whether it's intentional that there appears to be a kind of an optimism, or essentially a joyousness about the colour. Is that your intent?
Absolutely, Richard. I believe my works to be very positive in daily life, even with all the goings on in the world. I have always created works which spark joy, and in the last few months I've been driving a lot through country Victoria. My mum recently moved to Gippsland, and I live in the Dandenong Ranges, where I don't see many sunsets because I have hills obstructing them. But yeah, in the last few months, driving to Gippsland and often racing home for dinner with my son, I've been given the most incredible sunsets. Ones that have caused me to, pull over on the side of the highway and try in vain to capture them with my camera. But reminiscing in pink, my works, I feel, are very spiritual. I'm quite a spiritual person, and with that work, I was definitely trying to capture a moment where I was, in awe of Mother Nature. And yeah, I definitely, joy and positivity is what I would hope always radiates out of my works.
When you were saying a little while ago that, we were talking about that slightly thinner paint, and you were mentioning the performative aspects of your work, does that mean that sometimes you paint with the canvas flat on the floor, horizontal, or otherwise?
Yes. No, I pretty much always start with the canvases on the floor, which really allows that sort of almost at times throwing down of paint, and also too, because I do start with the paint often very thinned out. It's later in during the sort of end of the painting's life that I start to use a sort of thicker application of paint and sometimes palette knives. But to begin with, I'll often start with acrylic because I want to cover large expanses of the canvas quickly, because my paintings are very layered. They may not look it because at times, I'm taking paint off. to reveal, you know, what was before. But yes, I start off with them laid down. You know, I'm circling the canvas, and I'm constantly flipping it as I'm working on it.
How has that creative methodology for you evolved over a period of time? Has it been fairly constant, or has it changed a great deal over the years?
No, that has very much been a constant. I've always worked on a number of canvases at once, you know, minimum of 6, 7 works, sometimes up to 15, you know, for an exhibition.
When you say that you work on quite a number of pieces at the same time, does that mean, in a sense, that your headspace, how you're feeling, how you're thinking, is spread over all of those works, or does your focus keep shifting from one to the other?
No, I think you definitely, when I have a number of works in the studio at a time, you can see how they are feeding off one another. Yeah, I definitely see them as almost one painting. But then when I realize this, I then go in and focus on the one work in order to be able to complete that work. And yeah, it's
your methodology here has been much the same for quite a number of years. Would you note or mention any particular influences from your past that may have focused you towards this way of working and towards essentially this aesthetic?
When I'm in front of a canvas, you know, I'm never intimidated by blank canvas. I'm nothing but filled with excitement, and you know, I just can't wait to get in there and get my hands dirty. And yeah, I guess I'm definitely a fly by the seat of my pants kind of a woman. I sort of act first, think later. So, you know, these are very authentic. It's a very authentic way for me to say, you know, what I'm interested in, what I've seen. So yeah, look, travel was the first time I went to Europe as a 21-year-old. You know, I can pinpoint the very moment I walked down the steps from the train station in Venice, and you know, was confronted by the canal there, the Grand Canal, and I lost my mind. And I just completed, you know, studying graphic design for 3 years, and yeah, it was that moment and that engagement with different cultures and history. And you know, I'm so drawn to history and antiquity.
Take us to one or two of the landscape works in this exhibition, and maybe we could start with landscape with quinacridone. How do you approach the landscape when you start to respond and create a work like this?
Yeah, I never set out. I was surprised when I sort of walked into the studio one morning and went, oh my God, am I a landscape painter now? I can change. You know, I'll have 2 works side by side, and I think I would hope that, you know, they're very obvious that they're of my hand, but they can be so contrasting in their forms, in their images. You know, I can be a pure abstractionist, gestural abstractionist, but then, you know, I'm also have, you know, lifted decorative iconography and incorporated those into my paintings. So with landscape, with quinacridone, it wasn't till I had sort of finished the work that I realized that it was the forms of these incredible mountains and hills, both here in the Dandenong Ranges and on, you know, in East Gippsland. Those forms, you know, occupy my subconscious, and then, you know, here they are in front of me on my canvases. I'm a very process-driven painter. I've never in my life planned a work. Don't imagine I ever could. So yeah, they're very intuitive. But when I was looking at the work and titling it, I could see, you know, those beautiful formations and the colors of the sunset, and it's sort of all in my head, and I mix it all up, and then out it comes on the canvas.
Sometimes, though, the intent seems quite explicit because with, for example, mountain loud, it's a mountain. It couldn't be anything else. So sometimes there is some degree of specific representational intent.
Well, yes, indeed. And first, that painting was going to be incredibly minimal. That sort of almost sickly yellow-green in the background. There was just this beautiful graduation of colour, and I thought, you know what, that's it. That work is finished. I'm not touching it. And then I had that moment of sheer panic and thought, oh no, it's not finished. I must do something else. And without even thinking, you know, next thing, I've gotten a far too big paintbrush for such a tiny little canvas, and I've painted what is, yes, absolutely a mountain. But a friend of mine had not long before that been told by a friend of hers that she needed to be more like a mountain, grounded, still. And that really stuck with me and resonated with me. And yeah. I
would suggest that wiggle waggle, for example, could be read as a landscape form, but there seems to be ambiguity in there. Does it matter? Do you mind how people read the works?
No, I don't mind whatsoever. That was purely that work actually was one that happened quite easily. That does not always happen. In fact, it sort of seldom happens. But that work, you know, I was listening to jazz, as I very often, I mean, I always have music playing when painting. And it was actually, I was listening to Herbie Hancock, and, you know, the song Wiggle Waggle came on, and yeah, like that work just, it spewed out of me. And my paintings are like offerings for people to either, you know, reject or accept.
You mentioned also earlier that sometimes there are works that are really very different to each other, although always of your hand. Bright Eyes is a very different looking work to many of the others. Where does it sit in the exhibition?
It sits very much on its own, I think. It's very contrasting to the rest of the works. Though, if you know, you were to look over my over, you will see that you know, I've been drawn to symbology, archetypal forms for a very long time. You know, I'm really interested in, you know, looking at antiquity and history and seeing how people have lived, and, you know, what amulets and talismans and magical objects, you know, allowed them to sort of live their lives. And so, yeah, that work came about by my mixing too much paint, and I literally just poured it out onto the canvas, and then very easily I painted my eyes on, and that work, it definitely commands your attention. It's very graphic.
From the way you describe your own method and that development of the ideas and the colours and the materials that are in front of you, it is a very imaginative process, but it also seems to offer in its end result to the viewer portals to the imagination in a way. And I'm thinking of a couple of works. The Green Window and Green Dream Tunnel, obviously both green, but can you take us to those portals, and is that a fair description?
Yes, definitely. I hope to create works which are very immersive. I want people to be transported. I want them to go to a place where, as I said before, they have that sort of visceral, not intellectual experience. I want people to get lost in the works.
Well, it's certainly been great to be able to be lost in your works and in those portals to imagination and other possibilities. So, Miranda Skoczek, thanks very much for sharing your exhibition with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Richard. Bye.